Office Space is an all-time great comedy that quickly becomes a documentary as soon as you set foot into a building with cubicles. This movie is extremely unique and it has that dry but witty humor that seems to be a signature of the great Mike Judge. Yet somehow this movie didn't do so well during its initial theatrical release. Thankfully, the movie is a bit of a cult classic now and it gets some of that recognition that it rightfully deserves. But there has always been one particular scene that has stuck with me and that has kept me laughing throughout the years. If you have seen Office Space, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but without any further ado, let's talk about how Office Space creates the funniest scene in all of comedy. Now before we get into the nitty gritty, I just want to clarify that while I think this is the funniest scene in comedy, you may not, and that's perfectly fine because we all have different senses of humor. I might find something hilarious that doesn't necessarily tickle your fancy, and that's perfectly okay. Either way, let's just analyze a great scene in comedy. The first thing we should clarify is the scene in question. There are so many hilarious scenes in Office Space, but the one that has always stood out to me as a literal climax of the jokes is Peter's dream about Lumbergh. This scene is absolutely hilarious, but what really helps the scene take off is the build-up and the culmination of jokes that all pay off in this 30-second sequence. To set the stage, Drew, a co-worker of Peter, informs him that Lumbergh has ejaculated and evacuated with Joanna in the past. Upon finding out that his girlfriend has done the deed with his arch-nemesis, Peter is very naturally haunted by it. This segues into Peter having a nightmare about what it probably looked like when Lumbergh gave Joanna his own swingline stapler. Peter's nightmare starts off with Drew reminding him that Lumbergh rocked the box and changed the locks with Joanna. He repeats this fact to Peter 2 additional times. Right after Peter says this, you can hear a growl in the background before we get to see our first shot of Lumbergh.
How Lumbergh fucked her, Lumbergh fucked her, Lumbergh fucked her. That is great.
It's a small little detail, but I love it because it shows just how much of a monster Lumbergh is to Peter. We also see Drew reminding Peter to imagine the O-face that Joanna had when she was doing gland-to-gland combat with Lumbergh.
I mean, she was seeing the O-face for sure.
The part that is even funnier is when Lumbergh finally takes the screen and he still has that meticulous attention to detail that is present throughout the movie. His snide voice as he tells Joanna to adjust for him to the left is absolutely hilarious. Amidst the chaos, he still has his coffee mug in hand and he stares directly at Peter, addressing him like it's any workday. Because screwing Peter over is just a usual day in the business for Lumbergh, that's at least how Peter views it. And to top it all off, Lumbergh asks Peter for his TPS reports and he finishes off with his trademark,
Okay.
What makes this scene so great is the fact that it takes all the things that Peter despises and it manifests them into one nightmare. The movie also subtly foreshadows a situation like this happening. The biggest hint that we are given is when Tom mentions his jumping to conclusions idea. Peter dismisses the business venture and the audience for the most part does the same thing. We think it's a funny scene and there's not much to it, but this joke is a precursor to the fact that Peter will jump to his own conclusions when it comes to which Lumbergh did the dirty with Joanna. And the fact that Peter stressed so much just for it to be the wrong Lumbergh is honestly the cherry on the cake for this scene. I think it's hilarious that Peter goes through the horrors of giving himself PTSD, thinking about Bill Lumbergh of all people stuffing the muffin with his girlfriend. He wakes up absolutely drenched in sweat thinking about it. This scene to me is the comedic climax of the movie because it takes all of the jokes, like the TPS reports, Lumbergh's demeanor, Drew's O-face, jumping to conclusions, and it combines them into a 30-second masterclass. This is the comedic climax because it makes the jokes all hit a high point, but it's also dealing with a literal climax, which just adds more irony. This scene is an all-time great, but obviously me examining it will never be as funny as just watching it. But hopefully the next time you guys see this scene, you can have just a little bit more appreciation for it and for the writing that went behind setting it up. Looking back at Office Space, Gary Cole does an absolutely fantastic job by giving us a character who is sometimes way too relatable, and Mike Judge's genius is truly underappreciated sometimes. Office Space is a movie that didn't quite hit the numbers that it wanted to at the box office, but the legacy that this movie leaves is far greater than just that of a box office flop. Office Space is a movie that truly stands out in an almost oversaturated genre. Hopefully this video can help bring some attention to a true standout within the comedy genre. That's all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and please let me know your thoughts on Office Space in the comments below. These videos take some time to make and I'm a one-man band over here, so all the support you guys provide really means a lot. And as always, if you made it this far, thank you, I love you, and I genuinely hope that you have a great rest of your day.